Ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into Blue Please here on WoW Radio, WCRadio.com, with myself, Total Biscuit, and as one of our series of in-evenings with Uber Guilds, we've got the US first Yogg-Saron plus Zero killers. You should know this guild by now, been doing very well in the raiding scene for quite some time now. They go by the name of Premonition, and we have two guys from Premonition here to talk to you today. We've got Zav and Malachi. Malachi, if you'd like to say hi to the audience today.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
And Zav, feel free to introduce yourself.
What's up? How's it going?
Excellent. Now, Malachi, what's your role in the guild?
I am a officer in Premonition, one of the founding members of it, and I play a warlock.
And Zav?
I am also an officer. I guess the tank officer. I'm a main tank as well, a warrior. Right,
now, you've been in the news recently because of the kill of Yogg-Saron with Zero Watchers, but what I'd like you to do is maybe give us a little bit of a rundown of the history of Premonition, because this is not the first US first that you've actually managed to get, is it?
No, it's not. We've had several before this, actually.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about how the guild got started out?
Well, back during TBC, there were two guilds on Ilaria, Titan, which I was a co-GM and raid leader of, and Surreal, which was the number 2 guild on the server behind Risen. At some point during early SSC, both guilds ran into some attendance problems, whereas half the guilds were not really prepared for the hardcore raiding that both guilds were trying to push. So, we knew some people from Surreal, and we started talking to them how they were having the same issues, and someone kind of jokingly said, we should just, take our half the players that want to be hardcore and form one guild, and it actually kind of started panning out from there. From there, me and the GM of Titan, Randall, got together with Warren, Crix, and Rokaz from Surreal, which were all officers there, and just discussed a merger, and just decided upon it. Got together there and did really well, actually, for, just being a new guild. We were the number 2 guild on the server very quickly. We were nipping at the heels of Risen for a while. Kind of fell a little bit behind during TK, and just started really performing well from there. By the end of Black Temple and Hydral, I think we were like number 11 US, I believe.
Impressive stuff. Now, as I recall, you ended up moving from your previous server over to Senjin. Why did that come about?
Several reasons why we moved. The biggest one is that Ilaria is one of the original vanilla WoW launch servers and was thus running on old hardware. We were running into a lot of issues with latency in the instance servers, where it would take 20 seconds for an instacast to go off. Zav actually made a video of it right before we left, which is pretty hilarious. Not only that, but the economy was pretty broken there. We had a lot of issues with queues during prime time, which were preventing a lot of our raiders from coming on, and we felt that if we wanted to be competitive on a world level, we really needed to be on a server that was low pop and didn't have any queues to enable us to raid when we wanted to raid and not have any issues with people being locked out.
Indeed, understandable. I mean, you wouldn't be the first guild to do that, as I recall. There's been several. In fact, there was... You may have heard of the Legacy, I believe, used to be Top 20 World. I think they might still be. They ended up moving over. They used to be called Massive, and they ended up moving over to our server, which was a transfer server. Now, as I recall, I was reading through some of the old threads, and for some reason, some of the population of Senjin, at any rate, seemed to take a little bit of offense for you guys coming over. Why do you think that is?
Well, actually, I followed that thread. It was just one troll, basically just trying to be a jerk. I think that he might have just been upset because, his guild wasn't able to compete for the server first titles or something like that, and just kind of felt a little bit sour about it. But, no matter where we would have went, it would have been that situation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be the first time. Now, let's talk a little bit about Yogg-Saron Zero, because there was a common, we can now safely say, misconception that Yogg-Saron plus Zero was in fact, quote, mathematically impossible. Now, I don't exactly know where this came from. I heard it, personally I picked it up from browsing the Elite Jerks forums. There just seemed to be that kind of feeling there. Now, the first question I suppose I should ask of you is, before Stars got the world first on Yogg Zero, was it the general opinion of Premonition that Yogg plus Zero was in fact mathematically impossible?
Well, straight off, no, it wasn't. Pretty much, we were working on the fight for a long time, and prior to Stars getting their kill, we were actually pretty excited about having a world first potentially in our fingertips, and we were already getting very low single-digit wipes. And we were having a little bit of attendance problem, so we couldn't get the raid together in the time we needed it. And we saw Stars get the kill. We were a bit demoralized, but we knew we're close. But no, we knew it was doable for a long time.
Now, what exactly do you think caused this preconception to actually appear? Is there one specific element, or perhaps a combination of elements within the fight, that makes it seem almost totally unassailable?
Well, Phase 3, you have an ever-increasing number of mobs, the Immortal Guardians, which never die, and they get the Empowering Shadows buff. I guess it starts off as the Shadow Beacon, and a maximum of 5 of them will get that buff. And you have to, if you don't do anything with them, they put a heal on every mob around them, and it stacks to a point where you can't DPS through it, and it'll kill everyone, because the Immortal Guardians, they go up in health, and then they start hitting harder because that's how they function. So it seems like you have to somehow make it so every single Immortal Guardian only has a 1 stack of that heal. And that's where the difficulty comes in, because there's no way to discern which one has it easily. So, I mean, I guess people were thinking they have to DPS through a 5 stack of the heal, which is impossible on their tanks die. And the hard part is coming up with a strategy to split up the mobs enough so that way you can actually handle them or DPS through it, which is where each guild so far, or at least the original 3, have kind of had their own way of handling the Immortal Guardians and the Empowering Shadows.
Are you willing to share how Premonition actually managed that, since you're claiming that it was different to the way that Stars and I believe Paragon got the EU first did it?
Well, first you have to realize the big differences from Yogg Zero Watcher to Yogg 1 Watcher. With Yogg Zero Watcher, you can't use Thorm, which means Immortal Guardians are never going to die. If Immortal Guardians never die, that means they will be getting heals from their drained life, and when Yogg Saron uses Empowering Shadows, they will potentially be healed for a lot. And that matters because Immortal Guardians deal a ton of damage, and their damage is reduced as their health is reduced. When you're doing Alone in the Darkness, Yogg Saron will cast Empowering Shadows, which he actually always casts, but it only ever matters with Zero Watchers. It targets 3 to 5 Immortal Guardians with a Shadow Beacon. The Shadow Beacon will bloom after 10 seconds of being on a mob, and any mob, including the Immortal Guardian with it, and other Guardians, and Yogg Saron, will get a heal, which lasts 20 seconds, and that's actually called the Empowering Shadows. Heals for an absolute ton. It actually is enough to fully heal an Immortal Guardian more than twice over the 20-second duration. So if you have a healing debuff on it, like Mortal Strike, it will still fully heal an Immortal Guardian over 20 seconds. When the Immortal Guardians get the heal, they will, of course, begin to hit incredibly hard, because their health is going up, they grow in size, and they start dealing massive damage. So you have to approach the fight in a way to prevent the Immortal Guardians from getting multiple heals, because if they get like 2 or 3 heals, or 4 or 5, they will heal pretty much instantly to full, and you won't even be able to DPS through it at all. So they'll pretty much start one-shotting your tanks if there's more than like 1 or 2 Guardians. And that's the difficult part, because you have to somehow split up, up to 5 beacons on these mobs in a really small amount of time. You have 10 seconds to do it before the beacon blooms, and they all need to be, distant from one another so they don't like splash, and that heal doesn't stack on any of the Guardians. And that's hard because it just seems, this crazy execution. How are you going to target these mobs with this beacon when there's 20 mobs all flailing around, and you have no way to target them or tell which one it is really, because there's so much spell detail and graphics and everything's it's crazy. And Stars and Paragon actually both utilize strategies that relied on them getting all 1 stacks of the heal. That is, no Immortal Guardian with Shadow Beacon was within 20 yards of any other Shadow Beacon Immortal. They had to use multiple hunters to achieve this because of the really effective nature of distracting shot, which is pretty much a ranged mocking blow, where it will taunt the mob temporarily, enough time for the heal to go off where it's not near anything else, and then the mob will run back to the original tank when the debuff wears off the distracting shot. So it's very convenient for that, and then hunters are, pretty much required for those two types of strategies. Well, our roster in that Yogg 0 progress time pretty much had one hunter. So, we knew the capability of hunters, but we had no way to really make it happen. So we had to kind of cater our strategy around only having one hunter. Which means the best we could really manage is a 2-stack on any individual tank or clump of mobs. And since we're using 3 tanks, 2 of them which are tanking each their own kind of clump of immortals, we had to be able to handle all of those immortals on that tank, which is from 3 to 9 immortals, getting a 2-stack of the heal. And that basically requires 37,500 raid DPS if they all have a healing debuff up. So pretty much, long story short, is we required absolutely massive amounts of raid DPS, AoE DPS, for 20 seconds at a time when the heal goes off, and still required very potent healing throughput, crazy tank cooldowns, and just a lot of really intricate tank positioning and healing, and it was outrageous. You had a lot of wipes where tanks would just explode due to the mobs healing too quickly, or we made a minor positioning error or something. But we got it done with 2 stacks and the tanks, and we've done it a couple times, so it works. It gets the job done.
Excellent. Sounds incredibly innovative. It's nice to see a fight whereby there is more than one way to skin the cat. Now, regarding the fight itself, how would you rate it versus previous encounters that you've dealt with?
Oh, well, it's by far the most difficult we've ever done. I'm quite sure of that, because you go through so many different phases of progression on the fight. Like when you're first doing Yogg at all with 4 Watchers up, your raid is probably having difficulty keeping up with tentacle spawns and stunning him in time and getting the brain down in so many phases, and even sanity at that point. And then when you're actually starting the fight with 0 Watchers, a few weeks later, you have to do all of that while you're missing the 40% damage. You have no way to get your sanity back. Suddenly all these mechanics are coming into play, which you're almost able to ignore before. And it really does take a lot of progress on the fight to, get past every hurdle, getting through phase 1 in enough time without so many guardians running around, getting through phase 2, not getting overrun by tentacles, maximizing your DPS and target swapping. Your portal team has to be so on point and organized. And then, finally, phase 3, you have to get through phase 3 with everyone playing almost flawlessly with a certain amount of sanity and no one's dead and anything like that. No tentacles up. And then your tanks have a few seconds to get things right before, you can be wiped in phase 3 because of how much damage those mobs deal. So you have to do so many attempts for everyone to get comfortable and then actually execute it and get practice and get everything down pat. It was a lot of fun. It was very demanding on the raid.
Definitely. As far as it stacks up to other encounters that we've done, personally, I feel that it was probably less satisfying of a kill than, say, Firefighter, Memoron hard mode, the pre-nerf. Simply because with Memoron, we just kept throwing ourselves at it endlessly, and so it was very, very taxing. As far as Yogg 0 goes, the majority of that fight, in all honesty, took place on our message board in our strategy forum through theory crafting. So, when we actually went in and started doing serious attempts on it, and we finally killed it, it wasn't like we were banging our heads against it endlessly and throwing ourselves against, a seemingly brick wall for an endless amount of time. But it was definitely a satisfying kill, definitely, especially since we ranked pretty high on that one as well.
Indeed. Now, how do you think that Blizzard have actually fared with Ulduar in general? We've seen quite a few changes in design philosophy, particularly with the introduction of hard modes. We'll start first with hard modes. How do you, as an endgame guild, feel about the introduction of hard modes, in the sense that you've got a dungeon that starts off relatively easy and continues to be relatively easy, ramping up very gradually in difficulty all the way through to Yogg-Saron, and you're then asked to go through it again with various different bells and whistles attached to it. Now, is that something that your guild can get along with? Is it something that you approve of?
Well, a progression guild always plays to just prove that they're a step, cut above the rest. They can do things no one else can, or do it quickly than other people. So, we also know the game needs to be more appealing to just the hardcore, player base. So having easy modes or regular difficulty fights, which are a joke, and then you go on and do the hard modes, the same fight, but they're harder. I mean, I don't have a problem with it, because you can't expect them to cater to us. And the hard modes that they do, make to be a challenge for these kind of guilds, they've done a good job of it. I mean, a lot of these hard modes, Freya, 3 Elder, Firefighter, Yogg Saron, Zero Watcher, they were excellent fights in their original versions, or, after the whatever bug fixes. And I think it accomplishes their goal of having a way for, high-end guilds to distinguish themselves, while still having the regular modes allow, less serious players to see the content, see the lore, whatever they need to see. So I kind of like it. Our guild is kind of split. I know some of them feel the content should be hard, no matter what. And if, certain people can't see the end of boss, whatever, even in the regular mode, then that's how it should be. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Zav. I think that they did a very good job with being able to cater to, a wide variety of different players, whether you be, hardcore or, what they call casual. I do like the hard modes, how it ramps up in difficulty and makes it a challenge. I think they really delivered on being able to, cater to the different types of player base out there. One thing I am kind of disappointed at, though, is, in the beginning, a Blizzard poster had said that basically hard modes were going to be like, a hardcore guild's playground. And then they go back later on and then nerf those fights. And when they nerfed them, it wasn't just, slight things. I mean, they took a bat to it and an axe and a chainsaw. And it was kind of disappointing with that. On the upside, when you're going to farm this stuff after having already beat it and ranked very high in the world with it, it makes it easier to get it out of the way so you can get to the content that actually matters.
Indeed. Now, there's a issue regarding Algernon, and this was something that shocked quite a few people when it was originally announced that Algernon would only allow 1 hour's worth of attempts per week, and it seems they're sort of continuing along with that tradition in the form of the tribute system for the Colosseum in 3.2, whereby you only have a certain number of attempts on the bosses each week, and the quicker you kill them, the better the loot you get. So it seems like sort of a natural step up, a little bit of a branching out from that. So I suppose the first question would be, did you as a guild approve of the 1 hour per week limit on Algernon? Do you think it actually added something to the race, or was it simply a cheap gimmick to keep people from killing the boss so easily?
I actually kind of enjoyed it, because what it actually did is it forced a guild to theorycraft rather than bang their head against it endlessly, like a lot of guilds do. I think it was actually a really good idea in order to sort of, force a guild to approach a fight in a different way and, see how they can deal with it. With only 1 hour of attempts, obviously, you didn't want to go in until everyone knew exactly what they were doing, what roles they were having, and how to execute a strategy and, something that'll win. Sort of like Yogg Saron, this fight, 99% of it took place on our strategy message board where we theorycrafted a fight. And we actually came up with a strategy that I think is a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a little more elegant than some of the other, what I've seen with the other guilds. They seem to kind of like brute force through it, but the way we handle stars and whatnot I think is pretty unique and very cool. But yeah, to answer your question, we enjoyed it for the most part, just because it, allowed us to theorycraft, and it allowed a lot of people in the guild to sort of, contribute to the fight. Whereas, normally during a fight, you kind of come up with something, and then you just kind of bang your head against it until everyone gets used to it and it clicks. And I'm really impressed with the performance of our guild on that fight, considering that, again, you only have an hour of attempts, and, everyone had to keep up with the strategy on our forum.
Now, have you had a chance to try the new content for 3.2 on the PTR?
Yes, we have.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you just as a general opinion, I've noticed on several forums, as well as discussions on MMO Champion and on various YouTube videos of Anubarak kills, that the fight for some people has apparently been rather disappointing. So I'd like to hear it from Premonition's perspective so far, bearing in mind, of course, that you haven't seen everything of the hard modes and everything yet. What has been your general impressions of the Colosseum content as of now?
Well, honestly, we've had very, very limited time because of all the problems on the US PTRs, but I think they'll have the ability with their internal testing to make things difficult enough. I don't think it's going to be the same skill Ulduar was. I mean, there's so many more bosses, so much more to do, and this one's kind of artificially paced with their one boss per week, and then you can only start the hard modes after the entire instance has been cleared. But I don't. It seems like it's going to just be enough to barely tide us over, and I think Anubarak right now it does appear to be a little bit simplistic for an end boss. If he really is the true end boss, kind of unsure on that, because this doesn't have very many mechanics in the fight. But I mean, it could just be another numbers check or some kind of DPS check where it's simple, but like Algalon is it is pretty simple. But you do need to have a pretty high amount of DPS and healing throughput to get it done.
I think that last time we were on there, Zav wasn't there when we were testing Anubarak and his hard mode, and like he said, it doesn't really seem like there's enough to that fight to really make it interesting. And there's a lot of talk in the guild that Blizzard's kind of holding back, and they're trying to say that this is the end boss of the instance when it's really not, and there's something else is going to happen there at the end. I don't know. I don't know if I buy it or not, but yeah, I mean, there's not enough mechanics going on. There's not enough things to deal with. It's just very, very simplistic. There's not enough raid damage going out. It just seems, honestly, kind of disappointing at this point. However, I do have faith that by the time it goes live, that it'll become an encounter that's something that we'll really enjoy and that will be challenging. They've proven us wrong in the past when it comes to PTR things. Like Ulduar, for example, when we were testing that, there were a lot of fights there and hard modes that we were testing that were just, a joke. You're sitting there in max 25 level gear and being able to beat a hard mode that's supposed to be tuned around having, Ulduar best in slot gear for the most part. And then when it went live, there was a significant buff to it, which made it pretty much out of reach for the time being. So I think that they'll come through in the end.
Excellent. Right, well, let's move along a little bit to something that's not exactly mechanic-based. It's more about the seeming animosity between EU and US raiders, and indeed some seeming animosity when the Stars got their first Yogg-Saron plus 0 kill. There was quite a lot of animosity towards them for no apparent reason. Now, I have not seen Premonition getting involved in that, and indeed I must congratulate all of you for being very classy on your front page, bearing in mind, of course, we know certain other guilds were not regarding this particular issue. So I suppose I'm going to ask you your personal opinion here. Why do you think there would be such animosity between European and US guilds? Or do you think it's just blown way out of proportion by a few very mouthy trolls?
Yeah, I think it's kind of blown out of proportion by a few mouthy trolls, as you put it. Because, between the guilds themselves, you don't see a lot of trash talking between them. A lot of it goes on amongst, quote-unquote fanboys of each of the guilds or each of the regions. Personally, we have nothing against EU players or China players or, anyone around the world for that matter. We welcome the challenge and we enjoy it. The more guilds out there able to compete on content, the better. Makes it a lot more interesting. I think that there's people out there that just try to rile things up and like the drama and things like that, so they create it, and I honestly don't think it really exists between the guilds themselves.
Indeed. Now, there were issues, as you are well aware, and I think everyone else in the World of Warcraft is currently aware, with the Exodus Yogg plus 0 kill. There it was not considered to be legitimate. Now, I'm not going to ask you to go into detail about that, because obviously it wasn't you guys, but if you ran into the situation where a mechanic was perhaps not quite working as intended, would you have put yourself in the same situation, just put yourself in the same situation as Exodus for a second, would you have used that strategy that they did in the same way?
No, I don't think we would. I mean, we're the type of guild that prides ourselves on the fact that we don't use any kind of exploits or unintended game mechanics in order to beat encounters. For example, they recently hotfixed the demo shout and curse of weakness stacking, and that's something that we did not use at all during any of our older war kills. We dealt with it the way it was supposed to, because we don't like when people come to us and say, the only reason you beat it is because you did this exploit, or you took advantage of this bug or whatever. We don't like that. We like to know that we did it legitimately and within the realm of the way that they intended it to be done. I don't feel that we would ever take advantage of something like that, even if it meant a world first. It's really not worth it, in my opinion.
Well, I just want to add on to, there's kind of a line where it seems obvious when you cross it. And if you're doing something where a mob is clearly behaving in a way which is completely not intended, and I think everyone knows evading is mob behavior that is never intentionally done ever. I mean, that seems like it's something that you should know is not intended. I mean, if you're doing a very high profile kill, something like a world first, everyone knows it will be looked into by the developers. So it's a little bit foolish to either try and hide it or think you'd ever get away with it. I mean, it's just like, they check these things out and you will be reprimanded.
Indeed. Bearing that in mind, how common do you actually think it is that these exploits and questionable tactics actually come into play in the hardcore raiding scene? There have been numerous accusations panded around, some of which may have truth to them, some of which don't, such as, say, the disgusting oozling on Cthulhu and things like that. How common do you really think that is? And is it, again, just something that's been blown out of proportion?
Well, a lot of these things only come to light after it's been done, but I think they've gotten a lot better at cracking down on exploits. Ragnaros, the spyglass, disgusting oozling, that was a big one. And I mean, there's probably a lot of minor ones I'm really forgetting about that just everyone did, so it wasn't even viewed as an exploit. But now I'm not really sure what you could even look at anymore. I mean, the demo shout curse of weakness thing, that was hardly even known until a few weeks ago. I don't think it's that widespread at all. There's maybe very few select guilds that somehow figure these things out and keep it to themselves, but I think anything widespread is somehow made aware, or, the public is made aware of it. Anonymous, alts, level 1 alts on the forums, mention it, and then it just spreads like wildfire, and I don't think it's really that widespread at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things that people kind of blow out of proportion. One guild figures it out, or somebody finds out about it, posts it, like you said, on a level 1 alt on the forum. Everyone hears about it, and then everyone assumes that all these top guilds did it, or, that all these people use it, and it just kind of gets, all blown out of whack.
Right, well, I'll ask a couple more questions just before we round this off, and I'd like to know what exactly you guys want to see from future raid content, and we're looking forward here to things that are going to be coming out in the expansion, which one would imagine will be announced at BlizzCon, and of course Icecrown Citadel. What is it that you as a guild are hoping to have to face?
Well, I'd say more of the encounters designed where your entire raid is challenged, and not just a select few individuals, like, just your tanks, or just your healers, or just your DPS. I think a fight like Firefighter is a really good one, because the entire raid has to be aware of so many things at all times, and it really pushes everyone to be completely aware of what's going on, and then they still have to push out originally such crazy numbers to even stand a chance. Your healers had their own phase, phase 2, which is crazy, completely depending on them, and then everyone else had their own phases. Very good design, and it's hard to put anything specific, but if they just approach encounters from a way where everyone is pressured, heavily rather than just a few select individuals, I think everyone has more fun overall.
I agree with that. Fights where, it requires not only more of your raid, but more brain power and more people theory crafting. I'd like to see all the DPS classes become more on par with each other. I think that will go a long way. I really enjoy, when all of your DPS in your guild are competing for that top spot and have the ability to get top. One week you might be number one, the next week it might be somebody else. I think they're really starting to move towards that, and more classes are able to compete. Like back in Sunwell, it was all about Destrolocks and Rogues and, Hunters with a legendary bow. Everyone else, really didn't care, and therefore they didn't put out the effort. So they just, kind of just did, the bare minimum. Now it seems like people are really putting in the effort, really theory crafting their spec and their class to eke out the most amount of damage that they can in order to stay competitive. And I think that's really great, and I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see Ellie Shaman up there, being able to be good on a fight other than Vezek's hard mode, or Shadow Priest being able to dominate, things like that. It'd be really nice.
Right, well, I think we have run out of time. That's a lot longer than our usual interview, so thank you for being so talkative and for being so informative. Now, what we allow all of our guests to do at the end of our interviews is, of course, to give a shout-out to a dedication to anyone or any group they would like to do so. So, Malachi, have you got anyone you'd like to give a quick shout-out to today?
Just a shout-out to our guild Premonition. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart from sticking out through all of this content. It was pretty rigorous, with the normal modes and the hard modes, and I just want to thank everyone for sticking with it and performing very well, and making Premonition the guild that it is today.
And do you have any special messages?
Yeah, just gonna give a shout out to my Samoan barbecuers. That's about it.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to the one and only Premonition interview, only here on Blue Please on WCRadio.com. Thank you to our special guests from Premonition, Malachi and Zav, and I will be right back after this. Enjoy.